afternoon from Lviv in western Ukraine. It is day 5 of Russia's invasion of this country, and if Vladimir Putin had hoped by this stage that he'd have some key regions under his control, well, he couldn't have been more wrong, in part because of the resilience of Ukrainian forces, both civilian and military. At the same time, there are fears that he has moved more tanks and artillery into position for the next and far more violent phase of this war, especially if the tentative talks underway right now on the Belarus border fail. Could we expect more violence against civilians like this? It beckons the question, are the tactics of Syria coming to Europe? Meanwhile, 500,000 refugees have already crossed the border into Poland, Slovakia and Hungary in less than a week. Will this flow become a humanitarian wave, and how will Europe cope?
I'm in Dnipro, where there's still no shelling, but we're regularly hearing the sound of the siren as people here prepare for war.
And after Vladimir Putin put his nuclear forces on high alert, what does that mean? Amid talk of battlefield nuclear weapons, is it a distraction from Russian military setbacks, a negotiating tactic, or an actual threat?
And on that note, the question the world is beginning to ask is this: what poses the greater threat, Vladimir Putin's success in Ukraine or his failure? Peace talks are now underway, at least on the Belarus border, but there are few expectations of success. Earlier, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said the next 24 hours would be decisive. He's also appealing to Russian soldiers to lay down their arms. Ukraine says more than 350 civilians have so far been killed. That includes at least 16 children. And we should warn you, there are some very distressing pictures from the very start of this report by our correspondent Jonathan Ruckman.
This little girl fighting for her life is just 6 years old. Her mother waits beside the ambulance weeping. And her child is still in the pyjamas she was wearing when she was injured in a Russian attack on their home city of Mariupol. The doctors pump her with oxygen and try to revive her with a defibrillator. But it's too late. Show this to Putin, says a medic, swearing at the camera. Show him this child's eyes and the doctors who are crying. The Ukrainians say 16 children have been killed in the last 5 days. In a gym nearby, they're taping up the mirrors used for dance classes in the hope that they won't shatter if and when Russian bombs hit. In this cramped shelter, there is some comfort in the company of friends and neighbours. Small comfort, too, in the knowledge that the babies in their cribs will remember nothing of this, though there's a shortage of water and fuel for heating.
God forbid that any rockets hit. That's why we've gathered everyone here. We've been here for 4 days straight.
The arrival of a Ukrainian delegation for peace talks does not mean peace is around the corner. Those talks are on the border of Belarus, which is a launch pad for the Russian army, while President Zelensky is talking of releasing prisoners to join the fight.
В умовах воєнного стану учасники бойових дій.
Under martial law, Ukrainians with real combat experience will be released from custody and will be able to compensate for their guilt in the hottest spots of war. The key now is defence.
Satellite pictures show a large Russian convoy advancing towards the capital Kyiv, apparently still intent on forcing Zelensky's surrender. But the markings on many of those vehicles clearly identify them as Russian targets. And the scale of Ukrainian resistance may well have surprised them. The use of armed drones, for example, with this believed to be an attack on a Russian surface-to-air missile battery. Ukrainian reservists seem to mean what they say about defending their country, preparing Molotov cocktails amid the mud here. And all this may have given Vladimir Putin pause for thought, perhaps wondering whether he could get bogged down in a quagmire amid unanticipated bravery.
Ми захищаємо свій дім. І тому зараз всі ці хлопці, які зібралися, прості хлопці, стали резервістами, в яких є патріотичний козацький дух, і вони знають, що робити. Зараз зупиняти ворога. Слава Україні!
Yet the Russians, along with their Ukrainian separatist allies, possess an overwhelming firepower, not all of which has been deployed yet. And these Ukrainians, huddled together in the dark, know that. Mr. Putin's war may not be going as well as planned. But the question is, will he now intensify his offensive in search of victory?
Jonathan Rugman reporting. Well, let's go live now to our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, who is in Dnipro. Lindsay.
Matt, it is still quiet here. I feel as if we're on an island. We're being surrounded by sharks who are threatening us the whole time. And I think that's what the people here feel too. There's an important military hospital here, and we were talking to one of the senior officers there today. He said that they were getting about 100 military casualties coming here every day, mainly from the eastern region. So that's where there is a lot of fighting. He said that they were getting all sorts of different kind of injuries, mainly shrapnel injuries from artillery, but also, he said, bullet wounds from snipers. Now, they have been dealing with that since 2014, since the war started, but obviously that has really intensified. And what you have is you have field hospitals, and then you have local hospitals, and then the hospital which takes the people after that. And they're also seeing some civilians who are being injured. We were driving around this morning and we came across a huddle of about 20 or 30 foreign students. I was talking to one young woman from Jordan. There were others from Lebanon, others from India. They were all medical students. They were just about to finish their degrees. They came to Ukraine because it was cheap to study here. And particularly the two men I met from Lebanon, they said, look, you know, our country is a terrible mess. We came here because it was secure and it was cheap to study. Now they were waiting for a bus to take them over the border to Romania. And then we also came across people, as we did yesterday, preparing supplies for refugees coming here from the east and the south. Everybody pitching in, because for the moment this is a safe haven and people are coming here, but the fear is that soon it won't be.
Lindsay Hilsum in Dnipro, thank you very much indeed. And I just want to let you know, actually, what we saw this morning heading out of town, out of Lviv, trying to get to the border, is just one enormous traffic jam in both directions. This city is marooned by refugees on all sides, and they're extremely wide here. There are roadblocks everywhere, sandbags on the roads. Although there's no bombing in Lviv at the moment, and the Russians apparently aren't planning to target this place, they're taking every precaution here imaginable. Well, let's go now to the Ukrainian MP, Lesia Vasilenko. She's been on our program many times. We welcome you back, Lesia. How are you and where are you?
Hello, I'm in a small town just outside of Kiev. I'm here with my family and 4 other families, and we are staying here because it's a house with a cellar where we can hide from the sirens. And tonight we just spent the night under the stairs and close to the cellar, because we had around 4 sirens go off all through the night. And this is a very small town with just civilians, no military units around us, nothing like that. And it's a rock mining town, essentially just small and medium businesses. And still sirens were going off all night.
I mean, I know what that feels like, to be stuck in the city when the sirens are going off. It's absolutely terrifying, and it must be so much worse for you with your family. I wonder, Lesia, from where you are, and knowing about these talks that are taking place at the moment on the Belarus border, do you have any hope that they might succeed?
I doubt it, because I think the people who are involved in these talks from the Russian side, they're just puppets who are there to convey Putin's message. And judging from Putin's declarations yesterday, where he initially announced nuclear warfare, we can clearly tell that that president of the Russian Federation has gone completely off the wall, completely mad, power crazed, and stopping at nothing. I think we could even see it from the press conference, from the face of Shoigu, his Minister of Defense, that even he was shocked and very unhappy with that declaration and that decision being made.
So how does Ukraine deal with a man like that? How does the rest of the world deal with a man like that?
We fight. There's no place in this world for another empire. Empires are a thing of the past. We are all about independent countries and freedom and democracy. And if these words mean something more than just letters on paper, then we stand up and we fight together. Ukrainians are in unity more than ever these days. We use all the resources that we can, and everyone is doing everything in their own capacity. The army is fighting. In the air, we have our ace pilots shooting down Russian planes. On the sea, we are fighting. Everywhere, the simple people, civilians, are taking up arms. In just 5 days, the territorial defense units have 100,000 people sign up to them. So take example from Ukrainians and fight with us against this huge aggressor in the world.
Okay. And finally and briefly, Lesia, what do you think the greatest danger here is? Is it that Vladimir Putin becomes desperate, that he feels things are not going according to plan, and he then takes his war up a notch to the kind of levels of violence that we're beginning to see in places like Mariupol?
Well, Putin has gone mad, and the reason is that he is clearly understanding that this war is not going according to plan. He expected to come into Ukraine and be greeted with flowers and embraces. And this is what his military commanders were telling the soldiers, the simple soldiers who were coming into Ukraine. And now they are being taken hostage by the Ukrainian army, and they are recording videos to their families saying that it was a mistake to come here. Nobody is waiting for us here. They are stopping our tanks. They are calling us fascists. We were wrong to come here. And for Putin, this is the worst. So now he's panicking. Yes, of course, he's going to start blackmailing everyone. Yes, of course, he's going to try to take it up a notch. But essentially, we are dealing with a monster who's stopping at nothing because he's giving the command to kill civilians.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Lesia Vasilenko, good luck, stay safe, and thank you very much for speaking to us again. We'll speak to you again soon, I'm sure. Okay, let's go to Krish in London. Krish.
Thanks, Matt. Well, there's clearly widespread alarm over Vladimir Putin's decision to put Russia's nuclear deterrent forces on combat alert, and yesterday's Belarus referendum allowing Russia to cite nuclear weapons.
That's why I order the Defence Minister and Chief of General Staff to move Russia's deterrence forces to high combat alert.
Well, let's get some perspective on that now. I'm joined now by Patricia Lewis, a nuclear physicist specialising in arms control. She has served on the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission chaired by Hans Blix and advised the International Commission on Non-Nuclear Proliferation and Disarmament. Patricia Lewis, first of all, what does high combat alert mean?
So what we think this is a mechanism whereby President Putin can move the alert status for nuclear weapons from peacetime to combat so that he can later issue a decision to launch. Under peacetime regulations, he's unable to do that. So he has to transfer the status to combat and to that combat alert status.
Right, so there is a technical thing that, that actually changes the way weapons could be used or at least threatened. The British Defence Secretary has said this is rhetoric, that we shouldn't be, too concerned by it, that it's a distraction from Russia's military failures on the ground. What do you make of that reaction?
Well, I hope he's right. It certainly is a distraction in that it is distracting a lot of us. It could be real, however, and I think obviously the Secretary of Defense is taking that possibility into account. I'm sure our intelligence services right now are analysing every possible base, every possible storage facility where we know nuclear warheads exist, and seeing if there's any increased readiness in those areas. I think what President Putin understands is that the West is very frightened by Putin's unpredictability and the possibility that he might launch nuclear weapons. That's been true for a long time, whereas Russia has not been frightened by the possibility of Western forces doing that, because Western forces have legal checks and balances. They have ethical and moral frameworks for thinking about how those forces are used. So I think there's a very big imbalance, and he thinks that he will frighten all of us into stopping our actions. And I think that's a miscalculation on his part.
And could you just explain the different types of weapons at his disposal? Because there are intercontinental missiles that fly long range, but then there are also battlefield weapons. Could you explain, the impact and difference, if you like, between the two?
Yes, I think that's important. So from the days of the Soviet Union, there's a legacy, large number of what you might call battlefield or sub-strategic or tactical short range, lower yield, still very, very large explosions. There's about 3,000 or so of those in reserve. And they are integrated, some of those are integrated into conventional force battlefield maneuvers. And indeed, just before the invasion, President Putin was overseeing a drill of nuclear weapons and the way that they would work within those maneuvers. So I think that we have to see Russian nuclear forces quite differently from, say, the British nuclear forces, which is at sea only, and a long-range nuclear missiles. I think it's really important as well to realise that all of these have been in storage, and so they're not mated to the missiles normally. So there would have to be a very large manoeuvre to do that, and it would be seen by satellites.
Patricia Lewis, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, in the face of unprecedented sanctions, the Russian ruble has crashed to a record low. This morning, the central bank ordered the stock exchange closed all day, citing the developing situation, while the European arm of one of Russia's biggest banks is about to collapse. The Kremlin insisted it would ride out the impact. Our business and global trade correspondent, Paul McNamara, is with me. Paul.
Yeah, we've seen both the sanctions and the impact of the sanctions ramp up dramatically over the last 48 hours. In fact, just this morning, we've had an uncomfortable admission from the Kremlin saying, quote, external conditions for the Russian economy have drastically changed. So the two big sanctions we've seen in place. Some Russian banks kicked off the SWIFT system. This is international communications device for sending money around the world. The biggie, though, is UK, US, and EU restricting Russia's central bank from getting access to its foreign reserves. This is $620 billion worth of reserves that they were hoping to help prop up the economy. They would help to insulate them from the sanctions. We've already seen the effect of this overnight. Take a look at the value of the ruble, right? So it's been going down since the beginning of the war. That big dip there, that was when the invasion started. Overnight, it's gone down by as much as 29%. It's fluctuating around that level at the moment. Now, without the foreign reserves to jack up the value of the ruble, all that Russia can do now to insulate itself against rapid inflation is to hike up interest rates, which they've done. They've made interest rates jump from 9.5% to 20%. If you're a Russian business, if you're a Russian homeowner, your fortunes have changed dramatically overnight. These sanctions undermine President Putin's standing with the Russian people. These aren't just economic sanctions, they're economic warfare.
And briefly, the impact here.
So we haven't even seen these sanctions yet on oil and gas, but it's a two-way street. Russia could restrict supplies of gas. EU energy ministers are meeting today because they're very concerned about that. This morning, petrol prices have hit £1.50 a litre here.
Paul McNamara. Well, under pressure to do more to help Ukrainians seeking refuge in the UK, the Defence Secretary suggested new measures are likely to be introduced. The EU has already agreed to grant asylum to Ukrainian refugees for up to 3 years. Here, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is expected to outline more details of the UK's response later. Amelia Jen is in Westminster now. Amelia.
Well, as you said there, Priti Patel is expected to announce some kind of change to the visa system for Ukrainian refugees today. Those plans have also been discussed in Cabinet. We've all been watching pictures of people fleeing across the border, many of them children, and as we've been doing that, pressure has been mounting on the Home Office to do more. MPs across the board saying the government simply hasn't met the moment in terms of its support. Now, last night, as the Prime Minister was at a service at the Ukrainian Cathedral in London, he announced changes to the visa scheme. He quoted the parable of the Good Samaritan, saying that we must do, it would be right to do everything that we can. And then later that evening, more detail about the form that help would take was published. It revealed that spouses and partners of Ukrainians settled in the UK could come over, as well as parents of children and children under the age of 18. But if we look at who that doesn't include, that's brothers and sisters, that's parents, and that's elderly grandparents, an omission that Labour says was a shame. Now, the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, was asked about this earlier, and this is what he said.
I think it's very important that people recognise that the package Britain is supporting Ukraine with is very broad. It's not just about refugees and humanitarian. It's about humanitarian aid and humanitarian support. It's about lethal and non-lethal. And it's also about playing a leadership role. The United Kingdom and Boris Johnson has led on this issue.
Well, the bar for Ukrainians hoping to come to the UK is a lot higher than it is for those hoping to go to other countries in the EU. The EU announced last night that it would allow Ukrainians fleeing war to live and work in its territory for up to 3 years. The Republic of Ireland has said that people can travel to Ireland without a visa. So that's what we're seeing in other countries in Europe.
Amelia Jen. Well, Ukrainians living here have been rushing to provide practical support to relatives and friends back home. Donation points have been set up around the country to collect items for refugees and those inside Ukraine, from warm clothes to medical supplies. Anya Pop reports.
Every last centimetre of space is a premium in this van.
No, like what I'm saying. It doesn't have even small space. Everything is full.
It's heading to the Ukrainian border in Poland with vital supplies for those who have suddenly found themselves homeless and those who are stuck in Ukraine.
When you're watching that, when you see that, when you see the kids, when you see the mothers which need the help, they left the house with nothing, completely nothing.
When Marek Wysowski heard what was happening in Ukraine, he immediately sprung into action. By the end of today, they'll have driven 13 vans and 2 lorries to the border, but there's still plenty more to follow. He's being sent voice notes from those inside, telling him what they need.
Apparently arrived 110 children orphans from Kiev to Lviv from the children's center and like orphanage.
How do you feel hearing that?
In a separate box.
It's hard, you know, it's hard. It's just hard.
There's a constant flow of donations arriving, being sorted and then being shipped back out.
These are thermals and these are the boxes. If you guys want to tape them together, because there's
Margie Frew's home in West London has been transformed into an organisation centre. And as the days roll by, the requests from Ukraine have changed.
We need thermals, we need gloves, we need hats, we need men's clothing because the men in Poland are crossing in the other direction. So we needed to get things for them. And then we got a call yesterday about 11 o'clock from one of the people on the ground who said now their priority has to be bandages, antiseptic, anything to stop bleeding, anything to help the wounded. Sorry.
She says people have been queuing down the street to offer help, but out of the hundreds who have donated, there's one that sticks out.
One woman came to my gate yesterday and she donated, and she clearly had an Eastern European accent. And I said, thank you so much, thank you so much. And I said, are you Ukrainian? And she burst into tears and she said, no, I'm Russian. And she was sobbing. And I hugged her and I said, we know it's not you. We know this is not you. And she just sobbed. And everybody went around and started like patting her back and hugging her and saying it's okay. And she walked away sobbing down the street.
There are few winners in war, but amongst the horror of it all come stories of kindness and hope, not just in the cities where the bombs fall, but in countries over 1,000 miles away, doing their best to ease the pain of strangers.
Anya Pop, and that's it for now. The specially extended News at Noons will continue all week, and we'll be back at 7 tonight. Until then, bye-bye.